War is not a beautiful thing. War is an ugly thing. War has devastated Ukraine. War has devastated the Russian people. I mean, they too have suffered losses. There are Russian mothers who will never see their sons again. There are Russian wives who have to raise a family on their own because the husbands are dead. Russian sisters don't have brothers. Uncles don't have nephews. This is a tragedy. This is a human tragedy. Hundreds of thousands of dead Ukrainians, tens of thousands, if not 100,000 dead Russians, the wounded, and then just the psychological damage that's done to human beings when called upon to kill other human beings. It's not natural.
Let's dive right into the action. As Mr. Scott Ritter has pointed out time and time again, the Western narrative is deeply flawed. Ukraine, emboldened by its Western backers, launched a Neptune anti-ship missile from Odessa, targeting a Russian fuel ferry operating between the banks of the Kerch Strait, a vital artery of Russian logistics. This wasn't just an attack on a ferry, it was a direct challenge to Russian control of a critical region. The result? The ferry, carrying crucial fuel supplies, sank beneath the waters. 4 Russian crew members had to leap into the icy sea, later plucked to safety, but the incident reverberated far beyond the physical damage. This strike sends a clear message that Ukraine is willing to risk major provocations to disrupt Russian supply lines. The larger question remains, what consequences will this bold move bring? Meanwhile, on the other side of the globe, the United States, never content to watch from the sidelines, has decided to up the stakes in this dangerous game. Their recent actions point towards a level of provocation unseen before. The Americans have simulated a nuclear attack on Kyiv. That's right, they prepared for a provocation of this magnitude. The scenario they played out involved a blast with a 62-kilometer radius unleashed by a 100-megaton bomb. Now, let's put that in perspective. The devastation would be unfathomable. A shockwave stretching nearly 8 kilometers with a total impact zone of over 64 kilometers. And the human cost, a projected 2.4 million lives lost. These aren't numbers to take lightly. This isn't just military preparation, this is an exercise in psychological warfare, a deliberate move to induce fear and provoke a response. What exactly are they preparing for? Is this a mere exercise, or are we witnessing the prelude to a much darker chapter in this conflict? Of course, the Americans are far too pragmatic to simulate such a scenario without an ulterior motive. This is about more than just saber rattling. It's a calculated attempt to distract, provoke, and escalate. The US is not just reacting, they're actively pushing the world towards a tipping point. It's as if they're thrashing around in desperation, like a dying empire clinging to its last vestiges of power. We all know what happens when a snake is cornered, it lashes out blindly. The West is in decline, and they're becoming increasingly erratic and dangerous. But even as the US escalates its provocations, Russia remains steady and calculated in its approach. Let's take a closer look at how Russia is tactically maneuvering across the battlefield. As Inspector Scott Ritter astutely noted in a recent analysis, Russia's military operations are defined by precision and restraint, contrary to the West's often exaggerated claims of chaos. On the Russian front, missile strikes continue to rain down with surgical precision, while Ukraine scrambles to maintain its foothold in key regions. Russia's forces remain focused and relentless. Missile strikes have pummeled Ukrainian territories with a sharp focus on the central, southeastern, and southern regions. These strikes have zeroed in on industrial centers, vital hubs for Ukraine's war machine in Kramatorsk, Kostiantynivka, Kharkiv, and Sumy. Russia's strategy here is clear: cripple Ukraine's ability to replenish its military forces and resources by targeting military supply depots, vehicles, and fuel reserves. Every strike weakens the Ukrainian war effort, forcing them to spread their defenses thinner with each passing day. However, what's particularly fascinating is the strategic restraint Russia has shown in recent weeks. Despite their overwhelming firepower, they have refrained from launching a massive long-range assault, even as the Kursk offensive rages on. This isn't a sign of weakness, it's a calculated decision, one that shows Russia is biding its time, waiting for the optimal moment to strike. And the Americans know it. Today, in a telling move, the US Embassy in Kyiv issued a stark warning. They claim that Russia is planning a series of large-scale, long-range tactical strikes aimed at civilian infrastructure and government institutions. Now, we've seen this playbook before. The West is already laying the groundwork to frame Russia as the villain. accusing them of targeting civilian infrastructure. But let's be honest here, energy and fuel are as much military targets as civilian ones in this conflict. It's no coincidence that Russia has targeted Ukraine's fuel depots and military hubs, essential components for sustaining both Ukraine's military and civilian operations. The narrative that Russia is indiscriminately attacking civilians is nothing more than a convenient propaganda tool. By framing every strike as an assault on civilian infrastructure, the West aims to paint Russia as the aggressor while conveniently ignoring the military significance of these targets. It's a classic case of misdirection demonize Russia while justifying their own escalations. Turning to the ground game, we see an impressive display of Russian military strength. Western analysts have tried to estimate the troop numbers involved in Russia's special military operation. And their figures, while substantial, likely still underestimate the full scale of Russia's mobilization. For example, they estimate that Russia has deployed approximately 73,000 soldiers across its northern provinces alone. In Kupiansk, Kharkiv, it's believed there are 71,000 troops, a formidable force by any measure, yet Western sources claim these forces have been relatively dormant. How could such a large number of troops remain inactive for so long? Something doesn't add up. In the central front around Severodonetsk and Lysychansk, the numbers grow even larger, with an estimated 87,000 Russian troops stationed in this critical region. Donetsk, the epicenter of some of the fiercest fighting, reportedly has 114,000 troops. These numbers speak volumes. In this area, Russia's numerical advantage has clearly overwhelmed Ukrainian defenses, leading to their rapid collapse in several key cities. While the West might try to downplay this reality, the truth is undeniable. Russia's overwhelming force is steadily pushing Ukraine back, even in areas once considered impenetrable. Consider this: the quality of Russian troops, their equipment, and their leadership far surpasses that of their Ukrainian counterparts. The disparity is so great that we're seeing entire Ukrainian defensive lines crumble in a matter of days. And this isn't just a matter of skill or tactics, it's also about sheer numbers. Russian forces in Donetsk outnumber Ukrainian defenders by at least 2 to 3 times. This imbalance is critical to understanding why Ukraine's defenses have been so thoroughly decimated. With these overwhelming forces in place, Russia is not just holding the line, they're steadily advancing, reshaping the conflict in their favor. And in the southern front, we see similar patterns of dominance emerging. In the southern regions of Ukraine, Russia continues to assert its control, particularly in the strategic areas of Zaporizhia and Kherson. While Western media loves to trumpet Ukrainian successes in these regions, the reality is far more nuanced. The Vostok forces, responsible for the southern front in Donetsk and Zaporizhia, number around 52,000 troops. Though this may seem like a smaller force, they've been remarkably effective in holding key positions and repelling Ukrainian counterattacks. Moving further south, the Dnieper forces hold the line across Kherson and into Crimea with an impressive 130,000 troops. This is where Russia's defensive strategy truly shines. The forces here are tasked not only with holding territory, but also with securing the vital Crimean Peninsula, a key stronghold in Russia's southern operations. These troops are well-equipped, well-trained, and deeply entrenched in their positions. And make no mistake, their presence sends a clear message: Russia is here to stay, and no amount of Western interference will change that. In total, Russia has committed over 541,600 troops to this operation. That's more than 500,000 soldiers carefully positioned to ensure that every front is reinforced, every battle plan executed with precision. This is no haphazard deployment. It's a meticulously planned and well-executed campaign. And let's not forget what President Putin himself said about Russia's military strength. The numbers don't lie. Russia has the manpower, the resources, and the resolve to see this conflict through to its inevitable conclusion. Those in the West who doubt Russia's commitment would do well to remember that these forces are not just numbers on a map. They represent a powerful, unified force that has the full backing of the Russian state. As Russia secures its position on the ground, the geopolitical ripple effects are felt far beyond the borders of Ukraine. Let's take a look at how these dynamics are playing out in the Middle East and Africa. Shifting our focus to the Middle East, the geopolitical chessboard is just as complex. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken made a bold claim recently, stating that Israel had agreed to partially withdraw its military from Gaza. The supposed agreement, brokered by Qatar and Egypt, was meant to create a framework for peace with Hamas. Yet, as Scott Ritter has pointed out in his assessments of U.S. foreign policy, such claims are often more about appearances than reality. Israel has shown no sign of backing down. And the U.S. so-called diplomatic efforts appear more like hollow gestures than genuine attempts at resolution. This isn't the first time we've seen the West overplay its hand in the Middle East. Their influence in the region is waning, and no amount of empty promises will change that. Meanwhile, in Iran, the investigation into the tragic crash that killed former President Ibrahim Raisi has finally concluded. The official report claims it was a mere accident, a result of the plane being overloaded and unable to handle the descent, but suspicions linger. Iranian authorities quickly dismissed these findings, raising serious questions about what really happened. Was this a simple accident, or is there something more sinister at play? Only time will tell. As tensions simmer in the Middle East, the conflict in Africa takes a different turn, with Russia's influence continuing to expand across the continent. In Africa, we see a new front in the global struggle against Western hegemony. Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger have united in their condemnation of Ukraine, accusing the nation of supporting terrorist activities on their soil. In a joint letter to the United Nations, these countries have demanded action against Ukraine, citing its destabilizing role in the region. But this isn't just about Ukraine, it's about the West's broader strategy of meddling in African affairs, using proxies to disrupt and control the continent. Russia, on the other hand, has taken a different approach. Through the Wagner Group, they've provided these nations with the support they need to combat terrorism and restore order to their territories. The results speak for themselves. With Russian backing, these nations are nearing the final stages of their counterterrorism operations, pushing back the Western-backed insurgents that have plagued their borders for years. This is a clear sign of Russia's growing influence in Africa, an influence that is steadily eroding Western control and reshaping the geopolitical landscape. From Ukraine to Africa, the tides of power are shifting. Stay with us as we continue to document this global transformation, bringing you the latest updates and in-depth analysis. As Inspector Scott Ritter has consistently emphasized, the West's grip on global power is slipping, while Russia and its allies continue to rise. From the battlefields of Ukraine to the political chessboards of the Middle East and Africa, the balance of power is shifting. And we will be here to report every twist and turn as this new world order takes shape. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe for more insights and updates.